Steve Jobs didn't share the full picture, why it doesn't matter, and how understanding it allows us to ask the right questions. Let's get started. In this video, someone in the audience asked Steve Jobs what is the most important thing that you personally learned at Apple that you're doing at Next. This was filmed in 1992 and Steve had left Apple in 1985. He's been at Next for around 7 years and here's his response.
I'm not sure I learned this when I was at Apple, but I learned it based on the data when I was at Apple.
Bear in mind that in 1985 when Steve Jobs left Apple, they had around 5,000 employees.
I now take a longer-term view on people. In other words, when I see something not being done right, my first reaction isn't to go fix it. It's to say, we're building a team here and we're going to do great stuff for the next decade, not just the next year. And so, what do I need to do to help so that the person that's screwing up learns versus how do I fix the problem?
This phrase is not applicable in more than 99% of the instances for startups, small and mid-sized companies. This also doesn't apply to both of my companies either. The reason simply being cash flow. Steve Jobs can afford to take a longer-term view on people to plan for more than 10 years. But those of us watching are most likely not Silicon Valley startups with venture capital or angel round investors dumping money into our companies to spend. We cannot afford to think 10 years ahead if we can't even make ends meet for the next 3 to 6 months. Context is everything. Steve is taking experience from managing more than 5,000 people. That's great. What we should instead be learning is that in the position of management, in a position of power, or simply the CEO of a company, we shouldn't micromanage too much and take a broader macro approach. Trust our colleagues and employees to handle the issue, and if they're screwing up like what Steve Jobs says, then it's our job to ask what we need to do to help, so that the
person that's screwing up learns. And that's painful sometimes.
It's painful because it's our urge to correct mistakes immediately.
And I still have that first instinct to go fix the problem, but
what we should instead be doing is asking how we can help, unless that person is utterly useless, to effectively utilize the information Steve has shared. It is important to establish a methodical benchmark, a line that they cannot cross. If a colleague consistently fails to meet their objectives within a specified time frame, it becomes necessary for them to depart from the company. The longer-term view and approach are limited by how much money you have, how much patience you can afford to wait for the underperforming to meet your standards. Continuous screw-ups at startups or mid-sized companies are not acceptable, as it will put them in precarious financial circumstances. Now, rather than taking Steve's quote for its prima facie on its face value, I would say the biggest takeaway is to firstly adopt a more macro approach. Do not micromanage things too much. This rule permeates the entire entrepreneurial journey as it applies in all industries across all levels. The second biggest takeaway is to be like Steve Jobs and ask the correct question, asking what we can do to help to make the situation better. Thank you all for watching, liking, and subscribing. I'm Grant, and I'll see you guys in the next video.